1689, Reverend Samuel Parris created a small congregation that met in the Salem meeting house. Parris received much more for his work than others. He received the deed to the house, while others were often paid with firewood. Residents of Salem got very angry, and some even refused to worship there. In 1691, a new Salem Village Committee was elected. This committee rethought Parris's salary and his ownership to the house. The Putnams, leaders of a separatist group in Salem Village, were worried about what would happen to Parris's job and his ability to provide for his family. Parris would have to stay at the meeting house for days at a time because of the long commute from his home. His children stayed home with their slaves while he was gone. After all of the housework was completed, there was not much entertainment for his children. To pass the time, one of the slaves, named Tituba, told stories of voodoo to the children. The girls became very interested in voodoo and started to experiment. Their curiosity began to spread to other girls. All of the girls began predicting the future and telling fortunes. Not long after, the girls started to contort their bodies and make strange noises. These actions made citizens think that the girls were possessed. When Samuel Parris brought Dr. William Griggs to diagnose the girls, he could not find anything medically wrong with them. Because of this, he claimed that the girls' behavior was because of bewitchment. People in Salem wanted the witches that were responsible for bewitching the girls to be killed as soon as possible. When the girls were put on trial, they named Tituba, Sarah Good, and Sarah Osborne as witches. In 1693, the Salem witch trials came to a close. The first reason they stopped was because of the public's support. Respected ministers believed that some innocent people were being accused when there was not a sufficient amount of evidence to accuse them. The second reason the trials ended was that some accused witches that had previously confessed to witchcraft were taking back their confessions. With this, the public lost a great deal of confidence in the trials, meaning that when someone was accused of witchcraft, they were simply ignored, and then the accusation stopped altogether.
Many people were involved in the Salem witch trials. In all, 26 people were accused of being witches. It originated with Reverend Samuel Parris's niece, Abigail Williams, and daughter, Betty Parris. They claimed that they were bewitched by the Parris family slave, Tituba. Their symptoms were claimed to have been beyond those of epilepsy and diseases similar to epilepsy. They would scream, hide under furniture, make strange sounds, and go in contorted positions. They said they felt like they were being pricked by pins constantly. Sarah Good, Sarah Osborne, and Tituba were the first three charged for afflicting Betty Parris, Abigail Williams, Ann Putnam Jr., and Elizabeth Hubbard. Sarah Good was a poor beggar. She became poor because she married a man with a considerable amount of debt. When he died, she and her second husband, William Good, were forced to pay the debt. He ended up in jail, and she had to sell the house, leaving her and her daughter homeless. People who lived in Salem claimed that she was always filthy, didn't get along with the people of Salem, and was often accused of the death of the villagers' livestock. Sarah Osborne was also accused of witchcraft. She had not been to church in 3 years because of a long illness. Church was a huge part of village life, and not going to church made you a social outcast. She married into the prominent village family, the Putnams. Her husband died, leaving her with a lot of legal issues. Some people said she was accused of being a witch due to a strong push by her husband's family. She died in jail before she could be tried. Tituba, a servant for the Parris family, was the third of the first three to be accused of witchcraft. She was the first to confess to performing witchcraft. Her ethnicity was unknown, causing her to be an outcast among the people of Salem Village. When she confessed to witchcraft, she also said that Sarah Osborne, Sarah Good, and a man whose identity is unknown also performed witchcraft.
If you were accused of witchcraft during the Salem witch trials, things weren't looking so good for you, and there weren't many choices that ended happily. If you stood on trial, it was most likely that you would be accused, if they had evidence or not. It depended on who you were in society, who accused you, and what you did. If you were against a rich man high in the town status, it was most certain that you would be convicted. It made it an even worse fate if you were against a high classman and you were poor, or not liked in the society. Some people even confessed to being a witch, even though they weren't, because they knew they were going to be accused anyway. If you really didn't want to be accused and face the consequences, you could try to get out of town, or have a baby. Trying to get out of town could end bad if you got caught. Then they would think you were a witch even more because you were trying to escape. It would also be bad because you were leaving most of your belongings behind. Get out as fast as you can. You would have to start a whole new life, and the new life could end up being worse. Having a baby would only save you for 9 months. The people thought that the baby inside of you should not have to suffer the consequences of death, so they waited until you had the baby. It would be good if they couldn't keep the trial going for 9 months, and then you were set. but if they did, you would either have to have another baby or choose another option. Many women still died having babies, so it might not even be worth it. It would also be hard to find someone to get you pregnant if you were in jail. Another option would be to blame someone else. If someone else was causing you to have the unusual effects, it wasn't your fault. It was hard to accuse someone else, though. That is how the whole witch trials spread, because people kept blaming each other. Not because they were witches, but maybe if they didn't like the person. You could also not go to trial at all and face the consequences. Like Giles Corey, you know that if you go, you will most likely be accused. You don't go, but you have stones piled on top of you until you stand on trial or die. In most cases, you tried to get away, but they convicted you anyway. If you were convicted of witchcraft, you most likely died trying to escape or defend yourself.
Punishments. Punishments were very severe during the witch trials. In total, 19 people were hanged, 1 person was pressed to death, and as many as 13 people may have died in prison. There were about 150 people who were put in prison, but only 13 died. Even 2 dogs were killed. They thought witches could not do magic if he or she wore heavy leg irons. Therefore, while the prisoners were in prison, they all had to wear heavy leg iron. The punishment for witches were often horrifying and included hanging, water drowning, burning, and pressing of the witches. Some punishments that aren't as well known included the pyramid, the cat's claw, and the boots. The subject who had to experience the pyramid would be nude. They'd have their hands and feet tied and sit on the tip of a metal pyramid. Gravity would slowly take effect. The pear was a pear-shaped metal object which splayed out after it was inserted into an offerette. I will allow you to use your imagination on that one. The cat's claw was simply a metal, sharp-tipped claw tool used to tear the flesh of a conscious individual. The boots were wooden boards fastened to each side of the subject's legs, starting at the knee. As they were gradually tightened, they would be hammered repeatedly, reducing the lower legs to mush. In some incidents, they also burned witches, but that was mostly in Europe. Another test was the water test, which was the second way to find out if a person was a witch or not. The water test was that the accused person would be thrown into the water. If he or she drowned, they were innocent. If they floated, they were a witch. This tactic would have worked well, except most people who were said to be witches drowned to death after being proven innocent.